While enjoying this presentation, please consider becoming a museum member, making a one-time donation, or a tribute gift in honor of someone important to you. Use the QR code here to do so.
Can you hear me? Oh, good. Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming on this really snowy night. If you want it to snow in Vail, apparently, I just need to book one of these through the lens because I feel like it snows every night that we do these, which is great. So thank you, everyone. This is the first Through the Lens of our season this year. We've learned that we don't do them in December because nobody wants to come here in December because you're all so busy with holiday parties and such. So my name is Jennifer Mason, and I'm the executive director of the Colorado Snowsports Museum. So happy. Great job. I'm very, very, very thankful. And I have our chairman, Diane Boyer, is here tonight. Yay. She also is a Hall of Fame member and the owner of SKEA. And also Ken Erickson from our board is also here. Ken's here every day, which is so great. It's so fun if you ever want to talk to him. We have lots and lots of big donors and people who have been here for a long time in town, and many, many museum supporters that helped us transform this museum into this really amazing museum that it is today. It took a village, and it's pretty incredible. So thank you to so many people, Michelle and Craig Taylor, especially, like they're here today. And Craig also grew up here, so I'm sure he's going to chime in with some fun stories. So in order to celebrate the 60th anniversary, we just thought it would be fun to kind of throw out a couple of these. So we're doing this series where we've got Pete and Erik are here tonight talking about what it was like growing up in Vail. And then also I have Elaine Kelton and Caroline Pope coming to talk about the women of Vail and what it was like maybe raising kids. There's some funny stories, carrying lights, with an electric, like one of them that I read in their book was, she's like, we didn't have lights in our house. I just literally had bulbs on extension cords and I would carry them around, which is so crazy. I think nobody gets it, how hard it was in the beginning. And then also, I'm working on Rod Slifer and Paul Tessweed and Bill Hanlon to come and tell about what it was really like in Vail. So that'll be fun. But we just thought it would be a cool way to celebrate Vail and its 60th anniversary. So tonight we have Pete Seibert and Erik Brofos here, and we're so excited. And we have some other longtime locals that I'm sure will come, and chime in. And then Erik brought some cool slides, so we're going to go through those. But thank you so much. And then just a little museum plug. If you're not a member, think about becoming a member. We're a complimentary museum, and we're open 300 and let's say 50 days a year. So we close every now and then. And it's just fun. It's a good place to be. It's a fun place. Lots of tourists come in. Lots of locals come in. So it's really fun. So it's nice to be a member. And this Friday night, we have Tales of the 10th. Which is Tales of the 10th Mountain Division, and because there is a Legacy Day parade on Friday night. The parade starts at 6 o'clock at Gondola 1, and if you are there by 6:05, you might miss it. They're really quick, very efficient, quite fancy tours, and then the museum stays open late until 8 o'clock on Friday night. And at 4 o'clock, we have Tom Hames is coming here to do a free talk on the 10th Mountain Division. So that's what we have coming up. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for being members. Thank you for helping us with our capital campaign, being board members and volunteers. And we have a great volunteer staff tonight, Cindy, Moses, Ron, and then all the staff at the museum. So thank you very, very much. And now I'm going to pass it off to Pete and Erik, and you guys both have microphones. So, and I'm not going anywhere. So I'm going to stay right here and answer questions and help things. So.
Thanks, Jen. Let's give Jen a big hand, please. Everybody, I think it's great, and she recognizes everybody that's helped get the museum where it is now, but really, this is amazing. It's so different than what it was, 15, 20 years ago. I don't want to step on any toes, but this is really exciting, and people come in and they're attracted to all these exhibits. They really like the history of the whole thing, and it's a great way to recognize, it's Colorado, not just Vail, but Colorado. It's just we happen to be the home for it here, which is great for us, I guess. So I got here at the age of 7 in '62 when they opened up the hill. I think we moved here in October, and our folks, the first house was up on Rockledge Road next to Bear Tree, what they call Murkison Corner now. There were just a handful of homes up there. The parish house down the street was built in 1962 and still there. It's the only house that really looks like a 10th Mountain hut. You go inside it, it's rough cut lumber. It is real pioneer stuff. It's pretty cool. The village itself, Eric's got some photos, but the first buildings, I think, were the Red Lion, the Rucksack, the Gondola building, and Mrs. Hill's house, which was at the time, they lived upstairs, Blanche and Dick Hauserman. Then the ski shop, Vail Blanche, on the main floor, and the rental shop down below. Kim Langmaid's grandparents had that, Joe and Bunny. And, you can associate memories with certain smells. And Alfingen Black was an old wax that had a real tar smell to it. And that downstairs, Joe Langmaid's shop always smelled like that. It was great. So the first year, there were 8 of us kids. That were in school. There were 4 of us in the 2nd grade. Bambi Forbes, we were hoping to have here. I don't know if it's the roads, maybe. She lives in Squaw Creek and would have had to come up, but hopefully she'll show up here shortly. So it was Bambi. Her dad, it was Audie Keene, who built the Rucksack, and is a character in his own right. And then Linda Shepard and Guy Parker. So those were the 4 2nd graders. 6th grade would have been, let me see. Trying to think of who that was. It's still around. Or the older one, Maury Shepard, young Maury, would have been 6th grade actually, and then Letty Keene. Those were the 2 6th graders, because it was the Shepards, the Parkers. Kotze Parker would have been an 8th grader, and there's one more that's escaping me at the moment. Come to me though. No, Steinberg's came a little bit later than that. So we had Alan Brown was hired as our tutor, and the school was really, it was a homeschool operation. The Calvert School out of Baltimore, Maryland. They brought the books arrived in the fall with all the lesson plans for the Alan to teach us. We and all of our books and pencils, etc. And then we moved around from lodge room to lodge room. I remember I was out in the back of the lodge by the cafeteria in the fall. Alan had, it might have been the 2nd year, Alan had the radio tuned in because he was getting the news that Kennedy had been shot. I mean, these are the kind of things that kind of still stick with you. I think that's where I'll stop for the moment. Let Erik pick it up, and then we'll go to some photos, and there'll be some stories for you.
Pete and I are a couple of years apart, and I also came when I was 7, but that was in '65. And and then school for me was above the firehouse, which is would have been next to the firehouse that's there now. But my parents came to interview to manage Vail Blanche Sports Shop, and then eventually owned that. And we it's kind of funny because Pete and I are only 2 years apart, but it seems like a whole generation. Like we didn't travel in the same circles. I'd hang out with your brothers and things like that. But you and the Steinbergs and Parkers were just a teeny bit older, and for some reason in our small little town, we weren't in the same bushes together, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that was probably it.
But it was quite a time. I remember our small little town, and it was a long ways from one end to the other when you're little. And like Pete, he didn't say this yet, but I also broke my leg the first or second season up at Midvale, and I think you broke yours each of the first 2 seasons.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
first season, it was the old cable binding, and one of the kids, the older kids I'd been skiing with, it came off, it released the way it was supposed to, and they said, "Oh, we can fix that so it doesn't come off," and they tightened it up, and I had spiral fracture on Get Along Road somewhere.
yeah.
The second year, I was with Young Maury and maybe Mike Highland, and there'd been a pro race on Adios next to Pepe's face. It's been renamed, but it's that middle bottom face. And that year, so the racers were Pepe Gromschammer and Andro Molter, Christian Pravda, all these ex Austrian national guys and some Americans. And they didn't have snowmaking, so they took a fire hose up and iced the whole of Adios. And then Manfred Schober was the only guy who was one of the instructors. He was the only one who had a set of crampons. And he was out there putting the bamboo back in after these guys would knock it out. And Andro Molter won. He was the guy to chase back then. But there'd been a foot of snow, and they still had it closed. And we couldn't understand why. So we decided we probably could go ahead and duck the rope and ski it. And I made about 3 turns, fell, knew I'd broken my leg because it felt just like the year before. And I spent a little bit of time trying to get up and get out of there, but just couldn't quite do it, and had to sit there and watch my dad walk up from the bottom of the hill, and I knew I was in a lot of trouble. And I think, he ultimately decided the broken leg was a good enough lesson. And I haven't ducked a rope since.
Oh yeah, sure. Good story. No, that was an interesting time for sure. We only had, I never counted, but a dozen runs to ski, maybe something like that.
So North's,
And somehow we kept busy.
yeah, the Northeast Bowl wasn't open yet. Sun Up and Sundown were, but as kids, they'd send us out after school. So at 12:30 or 1, we'd have the afternoon to go skiing, and the only rule was you had to buddy up in order to stay safe. And you knew everybody on the mountain. That first year, my dad used to say they had one day in there that they sold 6 tickets. So. They did better than that a lot of days, but it's still it was small. The trails really were from Riva to maybe Over Easy,
Yeah.
something like that, in
And
the
then
Midvale
Avanti
area.
came, and then
Yeah,
eventually
Chiricahua a
the
little
other
later.
stuff. Yeah. Interesting.
The first ski races that came were the international races, and that was back before there was a World Cup, so it was sort of the predecessor for that. And what they did was that that level of racer of each of the national teams they'd have the Hahnenkamm and the Laberhorn in Europe, and they'd also in the U.S. they'd go to the Harriman Cup in Sun Valley and the Roche Cup in Aspen. And in order to put Vail on the map, they wanted to have they decided to call them the international races. And they had them here the first few years when Kidd and Hugo were the best American skiers. Jean-Claude Keeley was the guy who got the 3 golds at Grenoble. That was a huge deal. Karl Schranz was the Austrian who was really fast. What was great was that we had the Swiss racers stay with our family. There wasn't enough lodging, and those guys, it wasn't the White Circus like it is now. So they had the different teams stay with different families, and the Tweedy family had the Austrians all the time. So that's all where we'd go to watch these guys. They were our heroes. We didn't know anything about baseball or football or any of that, but the ski racers were really something. So
And my dad was Norwegian, so all the Norwegians stayed with us.
Stayed with you guys,
back
yeah.
in the day. Yeah, it was, and the Dutch stayed at the Willows, which my mom ran. Yeah, it was crazy.
it was just all so close and tight knit. The other way I described the childhood here was as sort of a Huck Finn thing in the summertime, especially because you just are out playing in the streams, getting lost in the woods all day. Craig Taylor's here. I was kidding him about we used some of the lumber from their house when it was under construction to build a tree house across the street up on Rockledge Road.
Yeah.
I had no idea redwood was that expensive. But yeah, and I kept it. It'd probably be worth $3 million now up there. But do you want to go for those photos?
Sure. I only brought a few because I thought Bambi and Pete were bringing some pictures. So
No, these will be great. I think it's just something to talk to, and then we can open it up to some questions too.
and apologize for the poor quality. A lot of these are pictures of pictures. And to find the original picture would have been a dive into somewhere.
Where was this sign?
It was sort of in kind of towards Lion's Head, I believe, as you were coming into town. From the west.
But it's the old gondola terminal in the main part of the village. Is that
You know,
right,
that
or-
was I mean, it was a massive sign. I mean, that wasn't a sheet of plywood sitting up there. It was probably 20 feet by 40 feet or something like that.
You know, that was such a challenge in the early years to get people to stop, to come off the highway and come in the summertime, get any kind of summer business going. And that was one of the considerations when they put the first Lion's Head gondola in, was to that it was a tall gondola. That tower, Tower 3, I think it is, or maybe it was the first tower at the top of the steep face of Buana. It got it way up in the air, which wasn't necessary really, but they wanted it to be visible.
That's a little.
So yeah, you've got the Red
Can you
Lion
zoom
and the
out on that?
Christiana in the back. Gondola ski shop.
There's more. That was the door to the clinic downstairs at the Red Lion, if you remember that.
Yeah, they'd have a
middle there.
doctor here during the ski season, so that's who set our legs for us.
Yeah.
I toe out a couple of degrees on my right foot from
Still?
from the first time. They didn't quite get it right. They tried to fix it the second time. It didn't quite come around. But then the doctor would leave at the end of the ski season, and if you got sick, I can remember going up to the mine doctor up in Gilman.
Right.
And he was this old guy who kind of had the shakes and held a syringe like this. So is that the Kindles? If that's a
That's-
Christiana, and is that the Kindles roof
Yeah,
behind
the
it?
corner of that greenish
Yeah.
thing.
So
bigger.
68 maybe?
Yeah, probably.
Somewhere in there.
Kent will recognize some cars. He can tell us how old they are. And you all know John Kirshner, that was a bartender at. Oh, John Kirshner, this is a ski instructor here. Used to be a bartender at Donovan's. I think that's it, Scout parked at work right outside Donovan's back in the old day. And
So-
then the rucksack.
Yeah, rucksack there. The deli, next one down. Casino Vale, Pepe's without a deck, it looks like, or with just a small deck, and the covered bridge building. Little bit of the clock tower. Sure.
Yeah.
I remember they'd come up, they'd run them right up Bear Tree, so they'd go right past our house in the summertime, and yeah, it was.
I picked one out of the creek and put it in our basement for a while, and then mom found it, and I had to call Nottingham to give it back.
So I wish Bambi were here. Audie Keene was the guy that built the rucksack, and he was Vail's first hippie. Bill Hanlon told me this story, and then Stan Zemler confirmed it today when I was talking to him. Audie went around to all the ditches where they were putting the utilities and ran garden hose, because then he wanted to be able to have it there to run speaker wire and wire the town for sound. And Stan, when I was talking to him today, I told him that story, and he said, "Yeah, actually, we found some of that hose digging the old utilities up." I just thought that was great.
That's awesome.
He also had wanted to put in a little tower feature at the top of his roof, and the design review board said no. And he wound up in the middle of the night. They pre-built a tower, the element they wanted, In the middle of the night, they cut a hole in the ceiling, and when everybody showed up in town the next day, his tower was in place. So, that's how things worked back then.
Yeah. And I heard Tess Weed's going to talk here at some point.
Yeah.
I'm sure this will be the same kind of crowd, maybe. Yeah. So over here is the deli, and there was a deck here on this right above Patagonia now. And you should ask Tess Weed what he did with his gun off of that deck. He'd shoot the numbers off the clock tower. He'd shoot at the casino building.
Yeah, they tried to hit. There was a harlequin mask as part of the logo on the casino building, and they tried to put one of the eyes out.
Yep. Unfortunately, there was also a liquor store below them, so
Yeah.
in case you didn't want to walk to Donovan's.
But you can see, I mean, everybody parked right in town in the summer, and the dirt roads. I can remember that was when skateboards were first a thing, and we didn't have any place to go. Everything was a dirt road. There was no point in getting a skateboard.
Yeah.
You could take it to Minturn, which is where we had to go to the movies, go watch TV, that sort of stuff.
Store. The bank was an Eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the casino? I got a story on Shika. They had some aspen trees along their deck there, and she went to town and said, "Yeah, I'd like to take them out." And said, "Oh, no, those are nice trees." She said, "Well, I'll trim them, man. I'll trim them up." She took all the
Branch.
but left the stumps.
That's I mean, the rules hadn't really been set yet. They were still working on all
A
those
suggestion.
things. Yeah, they were more or less guidelines. And to be a kid in the middle of that, you just had so much freedom, and you're just running around in the town, up on the hill in the wintertime, in the creek.
Yeah.
It was an amazing way to grow up. I just count myself really fortunate. I think Erik probably does too. And
The casino is the building in the shade on the left side that has like some slanted beam supporting it. Downstairs was KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken in those days. A lot of you guys were probably here then. And the top part was a 2-floor bar owned by Bill Whiteford, right?
right, yeah, he called
And,
himself William the Good.
Yeah.
And this year they're doing the ice bars up on the hill,
Yeah.
and that was something that actually Bill Whiteford did. He snuck everything up there, and did it overnight, and then the next morning he was open for business, and it took a little while for the ski company to pick up on what was going on, and meanwhile he was well received, and they did make him quit because he hadn't gone through the process with the Forest Service, but they had so many complaints he had to come back and keep going with it.
So Bill was at my parents' house, and he was Bill Wyford, good friend of the family's. So Bill, I was probably 8, 9 years old, and so Bill turns to me with this great idea, and he goes, "Hey, you." He goes, "Hey, look, do you like pizza? I'll give you a free pizza. I have this ice bar on the mountain. You advertise for me, I'll give you a free slice." So for the short time it was open, I skied around this mountain with a sign that in high winds almost killed me. I mean, it would like wrap around my neck. It was this big. It was a big sign. Anyway, and the cool thing was I skied with my cap guns on. I was still a little kid. I was like, I'm going to wear my cap guns and my holsters, and I'm going to sell pizza.
So we had role models. That's the important part. The other thing about Bill was that he's the one who convinced them to name the street behind the casino Wall Street, so that his mom could say that her son had an office on Wall Street. So that's where that stuff comes from. There's one thing I wanted to mention. In the summertime, we'd get to ride up the gondola and keep us busy. And there was always a roll of twine with a little T-handle stuck underneath the seat for evacuation, never to be touched. And you could get out far enough, and you knew you had about 10 minutes before you hit Midvale, so you could get the thing loose, get the door open, and take turns hanging on the window and swinging out a little bit and pulling each other back in.
A kid's ski pole that was shorter than the width of the gondola would fit in the lock, and you could turn it and open the when you were going up. So it was a wonderful treat. Try it, Jen. On the outside. Anyway, and then the casino later became Garton's, and you know what happens then. It was the only day. There's only one day a year that kids were allowed in the bar, and that was Halloween because we'd all dress up and just march right on through the front door.
That was the movie theater. Oh, this is a great shot. Yeah. So you've got the Mill Creek Circle. Yeah, Brown's. Higbee's back in the back, that light roof just there. Yeah. The True Bloods on this side, first one on the right, True Blood Lewis, Tweedy's, and then Lazarus, where Marty Head's place is now.
This is like Elmresi.
Oh, there. Okay,
that's the Christiana, right?
Yeah.
So where's Ted Kendall's? Where's the Kendall house now?
So it hadn't been built yet in this shot. And so that one of these is the Night Latch and the other is Poor Richard's. And I'm not sure which is Gaynor Miller was the guy that built those. And those were dormitory style. And just a few of the partners' houses.
Manor Vale is kind of right there. Yeah.
And then this building, that looks like it might be still part of the Anholtz property. Where the amphitheater is now.
Kent, that postcard you have that you showed me the picture, that's this house here. Yeah.
So is that the lodge, Eric, right? The two big buildings?
Yes.
Over there.
This is the lodge before they built this and Checkpoint Charlie, and then there's the gondola building, which is this would be the casino. Let's see, Pepe's Casino. Plaza
building. So that was there early, yeah.
The Hauserman House. That's the side of
That's
Clock
the liquor
Tower.
store and the deli.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah,
Yeah,
because
because
on the
Clock
uphill
Tower
side.
was here, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know exactly. I think it was 64-ish, maybe 63.
Yeah, it's 64 maybe.
Near the highway, in the foreground.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are. You said they were.
There are two of them. One was called Poor Richard's, and the other was the Night Latch. And I think it's the Night Latch. Is that right on the west?
Yeah.
We're guessing
Fact
here.
checkers in here, hopefully. Sarah will know.
Oh,
Okay.
she needs a microphone.
It's like where that fancy house is on the corner there on Vail Valley Drive.
Yeah.
And then Short Swing and Poor Richards
Short swing.
were the two dormitories.
Okay.
So it
okay.
looks like in that picture, maybe one of them hasn't been built yet, but I don't know. By 1968, all three of them were there. So there were just those three dormitories.
And
Yeah, what? Yeah.
this is the frontage road, yeah. Highway 6, which there was no I-70. There's no Chair 1 in here, too, if anyone else knows when that came in.
Yeah, they've got the line. Looks like the line's cut, but it's not there.
I think, is there,
So the area right here where this shed is, and going east on the north side of the creek was Henry Anholtz, and then part behind where the nature center is, there's part of that was his as well. But I don't know that he owned all the way up against. And then I think it was the Hanson Ranch, the upper part. But I'm not real sure on that. And then once you go east, you hit the Katipas and the Katsos ranches. Those were the Greek guys that they'd go and sit with them. They'd get up early in the morning and ride their horses up to check their sheep up in the Gore Range, and then come back down. And about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my dad would go, and maybe Jack Tweedy or one of the other partners, and sit and drink ouzo with them and talk about trying, just keep working on them about how they wanted to buy the land as the Transmontane Gun Club, Rod and Gun Club is what they started with. But
My dad was one of the original supporters of Vail, and so I gave Jen all the original documents, starting with a pre-incorporation agreement in '59, and so it goes all the way through, the pro forma. How do we arrive at ticket sales? How do we project the ticket sales? What kind of money we're going to raise? How much is a gondola going to cost, which cost a fortune? And so it has all the numbers, all the budget, all the people, all the analysis, and it's really cool. And Jen has that here.
it's great to have all that history. I've got the binder that they used to sell the partnerships when my dad drove around with George Calkins, and they went to all the country clubs because that's where the money was, and did their presentations, and it's interesting to see they knew that 70 was going to come through. That was part of it, but it all started with the mountain, with having this huge mountain, and I love going up on Ptarmigan Point and looking across at blue sky and knowing that looks a whole lot. It still looks a whole lot like it did when the first time Earl took Pete up there. And it's for as much as everything's changed on this side, that back side is pretty darn similar. It's changed a bit more with the lift this year, but at any rate, it's amazing how much they got done that first summer. The gondola, the chair 4, chair 5, to build without the use of helicopters or anything else, have to build in the roads to do each tower and get those lifts built in the course of one summer. There hadn't been a gondola like that built. Pretty amazing. In the U.S., they at that point, I think there might have been a smaller one back east somewhere, a 2-passenger, but something of this size. That's a whole other topic that we could get into. We could get Carl Eaton here to talk about what his dad did building the gondola and the lifts and so on. He was incredible.
But it's funny because I think my parents went on the same tour with Dick Hauserman. He drove them up to Ptarmigan and look over the back bowls and stuff like that, and then offer him a job. It's like okay.
This is how we sell Vail.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's to watch the village get built up and the roles be filled. The Dr. Steinberg comes and is the town doctor, and we finally got to a size where we could have somebody here year-round, that sort of thing. The school kept growing. We went from after the lodge, we wound up in my family's basement for a couple of years, then at the firehouse, and then further west where they had where the hospital now is. So that's about the stage where I wound up moving out.
And then we Lion's Head was built, and we moved into the gondola building in your father's old corner office. Do you remember that with the fireplace in it?
Okay, yeah.
And the whole school was 8 kids, and we all fit in your dad's office. And I lived on Beaver Dam Road, and I'd walk out and then ski down the last bit and ski to school. And then at lunch, conveniently, the staircase to the gondola was right there. We just go up the back stairs and go skiing at lunch, and then ski home.
I was thinking about coming over here. We should have a few more people up here, but there aren't that many of us that have either come back or stayed. A lot of my younger brother Calvin, Eric's friend, was an artist. He grew up that way. He wound up in New York City for 40 years. That's where he needed to be. A lot of other people, have gone on, found other things, but I think some of us just wind up with a love of the mountains, a love of the community, everything that the life that we can have here offers. It's expanded so much since when we were kids, obviously.
Well, I think for both of us, our mothers were still here, so it was kind of family was. Even if you went away to school or whatever, you still had to come back to Vail to, see mom. So.
We got any more questions about anything?
What's the truth maybe other people know about
The lost boy. The true story is I don't remember where he was from. he was maybe he was 12. He was a Boy Scout, and he knew enough that he got out of bounds. So the out of bounds line, the Game Creek wasn't open at the time, and he got out past that out into Game Creek, and I think maybe along that sort of southwestern, the skiers left boundary rope is the way I always think about it, with the Minturn Mile on the other side. He got out to that point and knew he was lost and just hunkered down for the night and covered himself in tree boughs and in a underneath the tree, and had the good luck to have one of the warmest nights of the winter. So they found him. He hadn't suffered from frostbite. He was basically had some exposure, but really not bad. That was pretty amazing. No, he was just a guest. It still happens. I was going to skin up Game Creek at about 9 a.m. last winter. It was the last winter before, and these two teenagers, guy and a gal, come out and they go, "Where's the lift?" And we looked at them and said, well, you've come a long way from the ski area, but that's where the bus stop is. You can get back to Vail. So it's crazy where people can wind up.
And they still do it. They go out of Bell's Camp and everywhere.
Yeah.
Thinking they're going somewhere.
His name was Martin, if you want to repeat it. Martin Kofler.
Martin Kofler was the 14. That's the Lost Boy. So I don't know what the.
And in those days, rescue came in the form of Testweed walking through the bars and pulling volunteers out to go back on the mountain to find people.
Getting enough people out of the bars to go do the night search.
Yeah.
So, Erik, you're still on the volunteer rescue team?
I'm not. I stopped.
Okay, you were
Yes.
on the volunteer rescue team.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
About mountain rescue? Oh, it's an awesome thing. It's like 24/7 ski patrol, basically. But it's for Eagle County. It's Vail Mountain Rescue, but it serves Eagle County. And it's for any way you can get lost or get out in the backcountry or injured, or even as close as North Trail will come, get you out and get you back to where you want to be. But some pretty hairy things happen in this county that we don't really ever hear about, and most of it ends well, but some of it doesn't. So it's all volunteer. Yep, and funded by, all of us. It's a great thing.
Yeah, they'd have to just sort of, it was hit or miss as far as back then.
Yeah.
When they do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I remember I started with that's me with your brother Brant.
Yeah, it's my youngest brother
And
on the left.
there used to be a porch there, but that's over on Beaver Dam Road. That's Morgan and Kathy Douglas's house. You can barely see there. If the rest of the picture was up, you'd see the Holiday Inn was being built, I think,
Okay.
which is the Four Seasons now. And the nice thing is we had, the Seiberts had a trampoline and I had a beaver pond. So it was like, I had a raft and we could go, so it was like mutual entertainment. It's like, and Ben Kruger, I don't know if you guys remember Ben. He used to be in charge of the golf course, and they would stock the pond once a year, and shortly thereafter I'd go over with a bucket and catch fish and put them in the beaver pond. And I had my, after a couple of years, I had some fairly good-sized fish to try and catch. Yeah, that was somewhere right about where the sheep was floating by, and in the summer, and I was like, hey, there's no icebergs going downstream this time of year.
The other thing I remember as a kid was that there was a stables over at Gold Peak, and there really hadn't been anything built east of there. So they'd take us over there. I imagine we were 10 or 12 maybe, and they'd put us on a horse and say, be back in an hour and don't lather it up. And we just get to ride out on those, where the golf course is now, just get out of sight a little bit and let it go, and come back. Hopefully the horse is cooled down, but it's amazing what the standard was, I guess, or what the concern or lack of concern, I don't know. It's just that's back then. That's how things were done.
We had street lights, so I remember that was a way for parents to, you know, when the street lights go on, better be walking home.
Yeah, I remember going. They'd show movies in the casino, and our second house was out on the golf course, and I don't know, I was probably in that 12 to 14, and they showed Psycho in there, and then in the summer, and I had to get on my bike and ride back past the old Ann Holt's place.
And there was one street light between Manor Vale and your house,
Yeah.
and it was like, oh my God, I just gotta make it to the street light, and then you gotta make it to the house.
Yeah, the casino was really the focus of a lot of stuff.
It was.
I was also thinking that the Irish Rovers was this group that
Yeah.
came through a couple times a year and was incredibly rowdy. I think that was part of the whole thing in Vail, you know, with Donovan's Copper Bar. I remember one year his Donovan dyed his St. Bernard Bandit green for the, you know. And the patrol softball game went on for a long time on St. Patrick's Day. That was a tradition that went on quite a while. The other thing that they do to open that up was they'd clear the gondola cars off the gondola lines on both sides, and then race from the top tower of Tower 1 down to the terminal with the evacuation bikes. So there's
Upside down
a
bike.
hang from it, and then see who could let it run the most. Yeah, on each cable. Later on, I came back. I went to high school in Denver and wound up back in college in Vermont. And I took a year off to go to law school. And my dad had left the ski company, and I was doing construction work. And I ran into Paul Testweed. It was in October. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm going to just do this for a year and go to law school." He says, "You ought to think about doing something with your skiing." And he gave me a job. I asked him a couple of days later for a job on the ski patrol. He was the director. And I really felt fortunate because that was sort of the tail end of, they used to hang glide. They stopped before I got on, but by a couple of years, they used to hang glide in the bowls in uniform. Or they on a good day, they could take it out to
Sandy
Swingsville, Sandy Hinman, use it to sweep forever, that sort of thing. We'd still playing that softball game between the ski school and the patrol, and Ludi Kurtz was the ski school director, and he gave me an old uniform, and I stuffed it and put it on the top of Adios,
I knew it was.
stood it up, and put a 2-pound charge in it, and then took 3 more 2-pound charges on bamboo and put them in a line, and then started at the east end when the game got going and just lit them so that they went off in succession. And when the 2-pound charge is just, 4 feet off the ground, it shook all the windows in town. And it was like, boom, boom, boom. By that time, everyone's looking up at the instructor, and I went back the next day to clean up and found a small piece of uniform. But it was a great, it just was part of the fun. The guests had a great time. It was all part of it.
Patrollers. Pete was patrol, I'm
Ski
ski school,
school.
so we're sitting far apart for a reason. But I remember Steve Weber and I stole a couple of toboggans and skied our ski school cheerleaders into the game one year with those coming down.
Yeah, there was always some one-upmanship going
Yeah.
on with that.
What can we do to put more of that life back in the Vail?
I've been trying to come up with those ideas.
Where's the rest of my bike?
It's weird when we blew them up.
They got too big. Anyway, this was on Ford Park, looking west, and when you kind of expanded, it was, I'm not sure what I was doing out there. I was probably going to light that on fire or something, but there was nothing around there. You couldn't. Manor Vale would have been just kind of off where Jen is in the trees, but there was no highway, no nothing. I was halfway to Seibert's house by then.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
At what point did you guys, either of you guys, realize that you were part of something much, much bigger?
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know that I ever, even at the high school level,
Yeah.
I don't know that I really got that. It was just it was where you grew up, so you sort of took a lot of these things for granted in a way, which it seems a shame now, but I think you're just so involved in it. You didn't really have the perspective. No.
No, it's the same thing. I think we, or I, you just weren't. It just went by. It was like one long summer camp. You know, it was kind of like you didn't realize what was happening, and you saw the building, but you knew the building was vital to kind of everybody's economic success. So it was just, and then all of a sudden, you know, I-70's going through, and you know, the Vail Valley starts sprouting out the end of Dow Junction, and Eagle Vale comes, and then Beaver
Yeah.
Creek, and all those kind of things. It's, I went to the mountain school. No, actually, I was the last year before they got a real building. I was down in Meadow Mountain, and we had which are still there. We had the Forest Service. I think their office. Are they still offices?
Yeah.
Well, no. I should rephrase that. Forest Service offices are in a big brown building. The little white buildings are, or were, the Forest Service office. Before that, Vail Mountain School had it, and those were like administrative offices, and a lunchroom was a garage, and then we had a couple of modulars, and that was the year I graduated in a class of 4.
That's what I was going to
The
ask.
first class,
Yeah.
and then the land was donated up on Catsos Ranch there for where it is now, and then they have had 2 buildings there.
That's something. I was in Denver, yeah. It was, at the time, it was called Denver Country Day, and then it got absorbed into Kent. I lived with friends down there the first couple of years. Lived with the Tweedy family the first year, and I went up to Penny Tweedy at her 90th and said, now that I've had 4 ninth graders, I really want to thank you for letting me live in your house. But yeah, at that point, that's sort of, my last year up here was 7th grade. 8th grade, I was over in Europe going to school, and then I was in Denver, but came up every weekend to race, and that was at a point in time where you could do that. You could race on the weekends and vacations and train in that way and still be somewhat competitive. So, you know, that's all changed too, right? It's completely different.
I really appreciate you guys' experiences, and I really enjoy it. But I'd like to harken back to your dad, and obviously he's the guy who starts all this. What was his daily activity like? What did he do on a daily activity here?
Now I got Sarah watching me. Sorry, Sarah Newsom was my dad's assistant for quite a while.
Right, but not in the really early years, not 1962, but I'm sure that after the only experience I have is more so with Dick Hauserman, actually, who used to go to the top of the gondola and thank everybody for coming, and that, because I worked for Dick before I went to work for Pete, but you know, we all had a routine in the office that was different than probably what your dad did in 1962. You know, it was like, I'm sure they were showing people around, but it wasn't an office like I was used to with your dad.
That was never, you know, Pete was a vision. Well, Kent could speak to that too a little bit.
I think a great story on. He was a wonderful guy to work with. I was the accountant. I was the accountant for the ski area, and this would be about 1967. And Denver newspaper wrote an article about Vail and spelled Vail V-A-L-E. And so everybody's kind of kidding your dad in the office, and your father says, wisely, keep them talking, we'll correct the spelling later. Right?
I think the thing that that Mr. Seibert brought, and I got to be obviously with friends like these guys and growing up around them a lot, and I think you could say that of any, like Dick Hauserman or Testweed or anybody, is they always had time when we were around. You never really realized the immensity of what they were doing, I think, at the time. But it was, you know, it was like open. I mean, I could just walk into the office if I wanted to, right, Sarah? And it was kind of, you think back about what they were creating, and it's like, wow, you know, there was still time in the day to, you know, to take care of us.
You know, he was the visionary. He wasn't the businessman, so it wasn't like he was spending a lot of time at his desk. There's a photo somewhere that was taken of him for an article in Ski Business magazine where he's at his desk, but he's got his boots and skis on, propped up, not sitting underneath, but propped up, and you're looking at him through between his skis. I can remember another photo of Batman had just come out as the popular TV show, and Pete they'd found some costumes for Batman and Superman, and Roger Staub and my dad and these other guys all dressed up like that and went skiing. That was part of it, and they wanted to share their love of the sport and their excitement about it. And my dad was, I think the part of what was so exciting for him was seeing this come to life and seeing who came in and who was the next person to come in and build something and the next restaurant. For us it was different things. Crossroads, all of a sudden there's a market and there's a movie theater and there's all these things that we hadn't had. And when they first got started, there was the party line phone for everything, and you went to Minturn to get your groceries. So,
And we didn't have TV.
yeah, which is that was okay. We read a lot.
Didn't know we were missing anything.
It's a great friendship the Durkheim's were from there originally, or were they over in Aspen as well? I seem to associate that name with Aspen a little bit. But Durrance, I'm thinking of Durrance, not Durkham. I'm sorry. They knew each other, but I don't know beyond that. I know that Larry Jump up at A Basin was a good friend of my dad's. My dad was, when I was born in '55, my dad was managing Loveland, and they didn't actually. They didn't live in Georgetown. I'd always thought that, and my mom told me a little while ago that when she brought me home from the hospital in Denver, it was to Bakerville, which is the middle of nowhere.
Dingman's Cabins. You remember
Yeah.
Dingman's Cabins there?
Yeah.
It was like where you get stuck on the way to Denver.
But it was the whole industry was so tight knit, and they were all finding ways to make a living doing what they love most in life. And most of them had been through the war and were sort of felt lucky to be there and just wanted a way to enjoy the rest of their life.
Pete, we have a question over here.
Hey, Pete, how are you? It's Lester.
Hey, Lester.
Yeah, we did.
Well, you should have been up here too, Lester.
No, there's a lot of stories that could be told, and there's been a lot admitted. We were in high school together, and there was a lot that was going on that I'm glad haven't been mentioned. But one thing that was kind of interesting that I always thought, hearing stories from my dad, was the dynamic in terms of the founding of Vail and the horse race that was going on between Breckenridge and Vail. And I don't know if you've already sort of gone over some of that, but maybe you can touch on some of the behind the scenes kind of events that really were critical to Vail sort of winning that particular horse race.
I think that's almost, I need to let you go into it. I don't know as much about it as, what we've been talking about is really the growing up side of it. I know that there was they were turned down on their original application for Vail because the Forest Service thought that they had enough ski areas, that they were worried there'd be too many and they'd spread the market too thin and everybody'd fail. So they had to be persistent about getting back to it. But Breckenridge opened the same year, didn't it? Eventually. Yeah. So it was close. And that's a part. So Lester's dad, Ben Duke, was the chairman of the board after my dad, and was in the 10th. It's I talked a little bit about the parish house. The Duke's home over by where the hospital is on the creek there was just a classic. All those, you guys had a ski room, and you had the racks there, and everything came and went from there. But a lot of times you were just putting your skis on your shoulder and hiking over to the gondola, right?
And the house is built in the Cape Cod style because they had no idea that the Petroleum style kind of went out.
and he picked a lot. Unlike a lot of people, they picked the one out there to be on the creek, and it was a long ways out of town. How are we doing?
Doing great. Yeah, no. I get more questions. Yeah. Yes. Craig's got one.
So just an observation. So to explain how. Sorry, the people that come to Vail, the people that go to Aspen, it's a different crowd, right? I'm just, this is my opinion. It's a different crowd. It's a different value system. So, and it draws families, and people get to bed early. They get up to ski early. You know, it's kind of a early family life town. So, can you explain how that happened? And
So the quick way, I'm a real estate broker now, and people ask me about the comparison and so on, and there are a couple of things. The quick way I say it is that they got Jack Nicholson and we got Jack Nicholas, and both are true. And we get the people that are very successful in a lot of different ways, but don't really want to be seen, don't care to be seen. They want to spend the time with their families. I think that goes back to that comment that Harley Higbee said about we just love to ski. You know, that was why everybody was here, and that's what they shared, and so that's part of it. Not that people didn't love to ski in Aspen. That's not it at all. You know, there's that whole sort of friction that goes on a little bit, and I think it's mainly between the newer people that come to Aspen and Vail that want to feel local, that they talk it up a little bit. Although, I can get some attitude from when I get over there and say I'm from Vail. And I do have a response for them because I tell them that there's a Seibert's Trail on an Aspen Mountain that was named for my dad. He was a patrolman there, and a ski instructor. He was my mom's ski instructor, and that's how they met. My grandmother used to be the hostess at the old Prospector Hotel by the rugby field, and my family might still be in Aspen, except my dad left looking for a bigger mountain with more snow.
This is funny because my dad had a place there too later. When would that have been? In the 90s. And I still have to go there with some of my ski clients, and they hire me here, but then I travel there in the blue uniform, and we get to cut their lines, but when they come here, they can't cut ours. And I remember getting dropped off at the gondola, I don't know, 8 years ago or something like that, and you walk up, up that little bike past Gorsuch, and I see the two, info guys like nudging each other, and they say, "You come over here to get a real mountain?" And I said, "Yep, all 670 acres of it." And then it's just dead silence.
It's a great mountain, though. We're over there in December, and they do a benefit thing. You skin up to the top, and there's a dinner at the gondola. And this year we were with somebody who convinced us that we could ski down afterwards, and we went ahead and snuck down the mountain. But it's a cool spot. It's the thing to me about Vail now is that when we were growing up, there were all the comments about it being sort of a plastic Disneyland sort of place, contrived, whatever you want to say about it. And the reason that the architecture is what it is because that's what worked in the Alps, and it's what works in this environment. So that's where they were coming from. They did Pete wanted it to look like Zermatt or one of the other big ski towns, but it's been 60 years now, and unlike Breckenridge or Telluride or Aspen, they all have the mining background, which is great. I was always jealous of that there was something that these guys all harkened back to, that they had this history and they had this thing going on that was really cool. And Steamboat, it's all the cowboys. When we were kids, you go up to the Winter Carnival and you get to ski jor on the main street behind the horse, and that was, that whole cowboy thing up there is fantastic. But we're now at a point where we are a ski town. This is what we were built to be. This is it, and it's our history. It's not contrived. It's what we are, and I think that's a great point to be at. I think my dad would be proud of that. A night like tonight, he used to tell me that he always liked the idea of the snow globe, the little town in the snow globe, and that's where we've been for most of the winter.
I have a question. Ooh, I have a question about the parking, because everybody always just talks about parking. When did parking go away on Bridge Street? When could you not park in front of Donovan's Copper Bar? Like all of that. Like when was the structure built, I guess is what happened.
So I,
Donuts in this parking lot.
I'm going to say it was summer of 70 or 71. Chris Tweedy and I and a couple other kids were working for the town, mowing the lawns and watering the flowers and the dividers on the village parking lot, which is what Erik was pointing to. So it was still a paved lot and all of that. And I think it's Joe Stauffer that's credited with pushing the structure, that we were going to get to that point. It's kind of hard to, all these things, it's hard to imagine if we hadn't had some people with foresight to understand what it was going to become and how many people we would draw and what we were going to need to take care of them.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was not here at that time, but my question is, I remember Craig's dad always us hearing stories about his feeling that he always brought up that they should have been building employee housing. Why didn't it get built?
I think they were putting the money into lifts and trails and all that sort of thing. But he was right. There were things that were done along the way. Red Sandstone, the circle that's right off of Red Sandstone, that's where Paul Testweeds, that a number of the people that are sort of middle management were given lots there. And so they were trying to provide. But again, I don't think anybody really saw clearly enough what the demands would be.
I think also at that time, a lot of, at least my parents, had second jobs. I mean, they ran the store, but my dad was also the judge before Buck Allen, and then my mom worked in the hospital. So I think we were the employees and we had housing. I mean, I don't think it was like it hadn't reached critical mass yet, but it should have. Obviously, somewhere in there. Like Sandstone 70, I think, was the first one, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So what are you guys trying to do to help alleviate some of those issues with getting workers here to be able, how do you sustain them?
Defer that to my
Can
councilman
you
friend.
repeat the question?
The question was, what are we doing now to try to address the same issue? It's been with us. It's been with us. Rod Slifer said that the employee housing that first summer when they were building everything, he shared a trailer with my dad and Maury Shepard, and that's kind of what they were doing back then. So it's always been a struggle. Right now we're in the midst of a few different projects. The residences at Mainvale's going to be finished for next ski season. That was 72 apartments, 144 beds. That's something that the town built. We recently rezoned West Middle Creek, like the last meeting I think was the second reading for that, and there are sites there to do more housing. I'm on a committee, I'm on the council, and I'm on the committee that's addressing Timber Ridge, as that's another place where most people feel we can really handle the density. It's close in enough that it works for most things. They're still going to be taking a bus to work if they're in the village, but it's a place where we can go more vertical. And one of the things that's always affected that was the parking code, and we've over time reduced the requirement for parking, and that seems to be the way that things are going anyway. That's what's held it back. If you look at Lions Ridge, it's a certain size. They didn't gain a lot more density because they had to comply. They pushed it a little bit with the parking with the current code, but we're addressing it more individually at Timber Ridge, and the idea is that there'll be more kids that come to be lift operators and things. And if we can make everything, you look at the residences at Mainvale, it's walkable for most things, and bus ride down to get the groceries. So that's a great spot for the kids that come from Argentina or wherever. So when we have locations like that, we really need to do as much as we can. We are in process, and we've got a goal of 1,000 that was done in 2017. They set a goal of adding 1,000 more units of employee housing, and by 2027, and we're on track to hit that. So, and we're looking at bigger things. There's some discussions about the land down by Walmart, and I think that's come out in one of our agendas, so I can talk about it. And that would be a Miller Ranch, which people look at Miller Ranch in Edwards and say, where would we be without it?
Not to go further down that road, but why don't they bring back dorms? Like a lot of these kids are right out of college, they're here for 4 months.
We're looking at the mix at Timber Ridge, and that's part of the discussion. Is if you have a building that's got a lot of 4-bedroom type of apartments that with a common living area and a kitchen that's more set up to handle a bunch of roommates. So that's part of what we're trying to do. There also is a lot of demand for studios. So it's kind of all over the board. I live in the Chamonix townhomes in Westvale, and that was done by the town. It's deed restricted. It was done to keep kids in town, keep families in town. And that upper cul-de-sac where we live, I come in there in the evening in the summer, and there are 10 or 12 kids running around. There are a bunch of families. And so it really did what it needed to do. But when you look at the housing, there's different things that we need for people at different points in their lives, and hopefully that you're keeping them here in town. So that's part of it.
I think things have been, over the years, been worked on that we don't always know about. And I know the family I work for back in 2007, probably 2005 to 2007, was working on redeveloping the Lions Head parking structure and working with the town on some plans to do something there. And as part of that, my family was going to have to rebuild Timber Ridge and increase the density and completely redo it. But that was 2007, and then 2008 hit, the deal wasn't signed, and now we're 15 years later, 16 years later,
I think we
trying to rebuild it.
We have the momentum and the support. Sorry to cut you off.
No, I just don't. I think it's not as simple as that. Nothing's been done till now. I think poor timing, not enough urgency, all those kind of factors kind of play into it. I don't represent anyone, by the way.
I want to go back to the 1960s, and there was employee housing. You guys were probably too young, but there were trailers over in Sandstone, and it was called Sin City, and lots of people lived there. But it was also like people that were here. In the 60s, you weren't thinking that it was going to be what Vail is today. This is beyond anybody's wildest dream, I think. But there were places for the employees to live that worked here, and lots of them were really just seasonal. So. And then the town wasn't incorporated until 1966. So, but no question, employee housing is an issue. But
so fast forward to 1975, I was a graduate student in physical therapy. I was out here on spring break. Fell in love with Vail. I called the Vail Medical Center at that point and said, just wondering about physical therapy opportunities for jobs in Vail. And the woman said to me, she laughed at me, and she said, "Oh, honey, there's no future for physical therapists in Vail." We have a part-time therapist that comes over 3 half days a week and teaches people to walk on crutches to get on the plane and fly home. That's all there is. So I went back to the Midwest, and I didn't come to Vail for a career, unfortunately. But my question to you guys is, if you put yourself back in your 12 or 15-year-old body, and think about what your thoughts were for the future of Vail, did you imagine how things would evolve?
Well, we had a house on Beaver Dam Road. It's still there. It's green. It's the only one that has been torn down. And we bought that for $68,000 in 1968, I think. And we sold at the height of the market in 1972 for $109,000. So clearly we didn't know that. Yeah, and we bought out in sandstone and so on. But you just didn't know at the time.
No,
you know?
I don't. And it's the scale of everything now, you know, and it gets to the real estate values and the buildings and everything's gotten to be so big and the numbers and lift capacity. I was working in Sun Valley and I came down here to ski Vail with my dad and see the first, it was my first chance to see a detachable quad. And I got to Midvale and these chairs looked like they were flying up Chair 4. It was after, you know, being on a mountain with those slow lifts, all of these things combined to create numbers that are, you know, way past anything anybody would have expected. And, you know, it's just, you look at West Vail, that a lot of it was built before it was annexed into the town because they never really thought they'd need to go that far, much less keep going. So it's, no, I had no idea.
I'd also like to say thanks to everyone for coming. I know
thank you.
A lot of the younger crowd is gone. So now that they're gone, we can talk about all those stuff. Yeah, I learned to smoke under the stairs in Manor Vale because they had a cigarette machine.
No, I don't have anything like that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Ooh. Sorry, I hold the mic much differently. Sorry. I know. Okay. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for coming. These guys are going to be here, so you can float, if you don't mind, kind of float around for a few more minutes and hang out. But those of you who need to leave, because it's 7:15, I told everyone they could make dinner reservations at 7:15. So hopefully, yeah. But I want to thank Pete and Erik for all of their, it's like Pete and Earl, but Pete and Erik.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jen.
While enjoying this presentation, please consider becoming a museum member, making a one-time donation, or a tribute gift in honor of someone important to you. Use the QR code here to do so.